Alrighty, folks. Welcome, 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 welcome. It's good music. I like that song. My friends, my people, welcome everybody. How you doing? Good to see you. Good to see you. Welcome in, folks. It's Tuesday. Not quite Wednesday. Not quite our favorite hump day, but Tuesdays are pretty good. How y'all doing? I need to find more songs like that, to be honest. That's that one's sweet. It gives strong Daft Punk vibes, I'll give you that, but it's just got this really nice I don't know, it's got good pacing, you know? Great start to that song. What's up, everybody? Sven, Knights of the Dice Table, Mrs. Tomato. Hi. Hey there. Punji, what's up, dude? Kirk, welcome, welcome. Firewired. Reese on Twitch and Twitter. Or on Twitch and YouTube. I can't say Twitter anymore. Jesus. Sorry. Lum, how you doing? Is that Lum or Loom? I'm fine with either, but I'd like to figure out which one you like more. Kirk, howdy from the UK, dude. Do you guys say howdy in the UK? Can you get away with saying howdy in the UK? Does that sound different in a UK accent? I say UK accent, but you know, it's like all the different ones over there. Being married to my wife has taught me that there are like 12 different accents in one single city in England, so I'll just group you all up. Sorry about that. Thanks for the sub though. Kafito, welcome. Terrible Bishop, Isaac, thank you both for the subs, folks. For some reason, the intro reminds you of the Men in Black song. Men in Black song? What's the Men in Black song? Huh. Okay, well that's a good song, so I'll take it. That's nice. I won't take it like I made the song, but... Alright, guys. So... Today we're gonna go over something that I think is... It's got a place in everybody's heart. This is one that shoots straight to the heart for most people. For anybody who follows Star Citizen and has watched a single CitizenCon, never get tired of hearing about the economy. The quantum economy that will fix all of our problems and make everything work perfectly and solve world hunger. The economy in Star Citizen is something that has been explained a lot, but not really implemented just yet. It is something that has been... It makes sense, and it sounds amazing, and it's just a really interesting concept, but like we've just been chasing that one down for a while. So today I figured we would start from the very beginning, like the very beginning. This is like July 6th, 2013. They didn't even have an asset yet. We're starting with the very first explanation of what they wanted with the economy in Star Citizen. We will then move on to the introduction of Tony Zurovic, Tony Z. Shout out to Tony in chat. Can I get a Tony Z? 10 for the chairman. A little bit of Chris Roberts in there. You gotta, if you want to have a Tony Zurovic salad, you gotta sprinkle a little bit of Chris Roberts flavoring on top. Also our friend. Then we will be moving on to, I just had a couple of little things that I found on the economy I thought were interesting. So we'll listen to this. Kind of talks about how long should it take to earn a spaceship? How much should it actually cost? Which I think is probably what the whole economy should be based around, right? So we'll touch on that. That shouldn't be there. We will then jump to the first official explanation of the quantum economy at 2019 CitizenCon. After that, the follow-up, which was a year and a half later, followed by CitizenCon 2021. And then that's it. That's all that's the only information that we have. So besides that, you're gonna have to watch my monthly report videos because this is everything that I know we have on the economy. Besides, like I just said, monthly report stuff and little updates here and there. We have gotten a little bit of a quantum economy update. Actually, if we have time, we'll talk about that on the end. But that's just a little bit of commodity stuff, refuel, repair, and rearm prices, and probability volumes changing how you run into those combat beacons and stuff. So there's a little bit in the game. I'll give them that. And I think the systemic services and tools team has been working on a lot of other stuff at the same time, specifically with like server meshing and PES. So things, I would say I expect more updates than we've gotten, especially if they were just like, hey, this is nowhere near finished kind of updates, but we just aren't getting that. So we will start with this, folks. Once again, welcome in. Welcome in if you just got in here. We're doing economy stuff. Everybody's favorite. Quantum economy fixes all economy, and server meshing should fix all game limitations. Let's hope that's all true. I think they will lead to the fixes for those things. I think they're going to enable that stuff. Kind of like PES is letting people do a little bit more as well. What's up, Toes Gang? Welcome in. Darth Mad, hello. How you doing? Vanku, good to see ya. Lance Arn, welcome. Folks, before we get started, just want to let you know the Ares Inferno giveaway is still going on. I'm going to be putting out one more video with a secret code in it. And I'm thinking maybe we will do a little goal at the end of the week here. The giveaway will end this weekend. So we'll do a little goal at the end of the week. Go down. What happened, YouTube? What is going on? How about Twitch? You guys good on Twitch? I think I'm good on Twitch. Oh, now we're back up on YouTube. What is the... I'm telling you guys. I'm telling you. I don't do anything, all right? These things just happen. Wait, you can't see me on Twitch. Shut up, Bishop. Don't give me that. I know you're lying now. All right. Let's get into this, folks. First video that we've got here is the explanation of the Star Citizen economy. This is literally the first we got to hear about it. And I'll let you guys get a first listen. Whoa, sorry. That was really loud.
The economy itself, first of all, in Star Citizen is completely dynamic. So the player's actions are going to be affecting the supply and demand and the prices. So a lot of the missions that are generated for players to take, or even AI to go and do, are created by the economy system itself. To give you an example, if you have a weapons factory sitting on a planet and it requires 3 tons of metal alloy and 1 ton of high explosive and 1 ton of electronics to create 20 missiles in a game turn, that factory will create a mission out on the mission boards, which we'll have like in a system, and that will propagate to other systems at sort of the speed of communication in the Star Citizen universe. And it will say, hey, look, I need 3 tons of steel alloy, 1 ton of high explosive, 1 ton of electronics, and who wants to take them? And so in that case, a player could look at the mission board and go, oh, look, there's a mission to take 3 tons. Okay, I'll take it, and fly in with the alloy. And if the player doesn't do it, an AI will take it and fly the stuff in. And along the way, if that player or the AI get attacked by a pirate and they don't make it through, then the goods aren't getting to the factory. The factory doesn't have the materials it needs to make the missiles, so it can't produce missiles that turn. Now, if people are buying missiles in that system, the inventory on the show floor will dwindle and they won't have any more missiles, which will mean the supply's low, so the demand's high. Prices will probably go up. Now, that factory will probably say, I have a pirate problem on my getting my raw materials. So it will create a mission with the Mercenaries Guild and says, I need you to go and clear out the pirates that are attacking this stuff, or I need you to be an escort ship escorting these alloys in. So that creates missions for mercenaries there. So players' actions as a pirate or as a trader could affect what's happening in the economy. The pirates could be strangling supply to planets, or other people could be blockading it, and then if supplies aren't getting through, that planet will be creating missions to get supplies or get people to open the blockade. So basically the economy itself is generating a lot of the action, and the missions are going on. And by the way, in that combat that you're having, like the pirate that is attacking the merchant ship, well, missiles are getting fired, ships are getting blown up. Well, that's demand on the economy side. So, that means that more missiles will have to be replenished, or a ship has to be replenished. So there's factory nodes on planets making the ships. And so it all is kind of balanced. Hopefully from that you can sort of see how the economy, and the fact that it's dynamic, is generating missions for other players, or generating missions for AI, is creating supply and demand and consumption and production.
All right, so it's pretty straightforward, right? Like, hey, and Tyrus, I see you. Hold on. What happened to these? We always have to turn the YouTube ones off because they go so crazy. Tyrus, thank you so much, dude, for the memberships, man. Appreciate you. Stream Santa. Nah, that's Walgreens. But we appreciate Tyrus though. Tyrus is not only a common stand-in in chat, chilling in here, also runs a lot of our events over at GII. If you're looking for a group to play some Star Citizen with, we got good people, as you can see. So the economy here is clearly based on supply and demand. What he doesn't say there is, I guess, something that they start to talk about a little bit more later. They want that to be mainly covered by NPCs, or by AI. Not necessarily NPCs, because they won't be physicalized, but the idea is that the same missions will be taken between NPCs or AI and players, and will kind of compete for them. But I don't know. I feel like there is. It sounds really good in theory, but then I start to think about the complications of, like, if you're waiting for a large cargo mission to spawn at the space station you're at, you have to wait for 10 different smaller missions to bring cargo from the planet to that space station. Like, does the space station send that mission out to you, or does like an outpost down on the ground send a mission to you saying that they want to ship goods from their outpost to another planet? You know what I mean? So, like, the space station could call for you to ship supplies just from the space station out to another space station, or the outpost on the ground could call for a mission to send stuff to that space station. I am not making sense. I said it a lot better in one of my videos. Go look at that. But it sounds like a good system in that you can just run all the missions you want because they're always going to be generating based on an economy. But they don't really explain how it works, at least back then. What's up, early gang? DJ, you're still early. If you're not late, you're early, right? Well, you're late, so... Sorry. Is this the same economy formula like other popular space games? There are a couple things that are different. I think one of the biggest things that are different are the way they simulate AI to run these missions. They're not just throwaway AI. They don't just pop in, do something, pop out. They have AI that will persist throughout the game, so you could run into a cargo hauler once and maybe find them somewhere else way off in the distance again, because they're going to be tracked and traced, and they'll have a lot of different attributes. So you might have a turret gunner that wants to find work but isn't willing to take too dangerous a position because they're kind of scared, but they want to shoot things. So then if you're in a system where there's too much danger around, they might not work for you. So, like, there's a lot of little nuances in the economy that are simulated like that, but it took them a long time to start to actually tell us that. For most of the time, they were just saying things like what you're about to hear, which is mostly words. And while I will say the later stuff is still mostly words, there's a lot of pretty graphics to go with it. So, you know, we like graphics, but it was conceptual for a really long time. Still is, just a little more visible now. Pretty sure that video was before they had a plan on how to actually achieve what they wanted. Yeah, and this is also going to be like that. This is June 19th, 2014. This is the introduction of Tony Zurvik onto the Star Citizen team. So I think, you know what? How about let me open this too, because it might be the case that, like, let me let him say what he's actually doing in the game, and then we will jump to what he's excited to bring into the game. I think they're both interesting answers. Here we go.
Hello, everyone. We have a very special guest here, and some pretty exciting news. We're growing the team at Cloud Imperium, working on Star Citizen, and I'd like to introduce you to Tony Zurvik, who is someone that I've known for, I don't know, a very long time.
24 years.
24 years. So we first worked together at Origin. Tony came in to work actually on Ultima 7. Did all the AI, I believe, on Ultima 7, and then was the lead engineer on Ultima 8. And then went off to make Crusader No Remorse and then No Regret. And When I left Origin to start Digital Anvil, Tony came with me and was one of the founders. We worked together there until we sold the company to Microsoft. We've been talking since Star Citizen got off the ground, and I finally persuaded him to join up. He's going to be helping us make the game, but more specifically, he's going to be heading up the persistent universe part of the game, because the game has become so big that I can't actually direct every single aspect of it every single moment of the day. And Tony's very much like me. He's got programming and a design background and sort of overseeing games on all the aspects. So, both the creative aspect, the technical aspect, and the artistic aspect. This game, Star Citizen, is so big that we sort of need multiple people that have that sort of cross-discipline ability. So I was talking to Tony, who is a huge sort of, not everyone out there may know it from some of the past games, but...
Man, there's a lot of cuts in here. Okay, so we got an idea of who Tony is. Let's jump to... There were a lot of cuts in there. Let's jump to what he was talking about adding into the game.
Specific thing that I'm most excited to add to Star Citizen. It's more the breadth of stuff that I would like to add. It's like I want diversity, variety. I want so much content out there that players can effectively choose any of a range of different occupations that they want to pursue, and know that there's going to be so much content within the game that they can do that for an extended period of time and encounter, so much of interest that they're going to stay, that they're going to continue to have fun, for a long time, regardless of whether they're pirate or mercenary or bounty hunter or freighter or any of a million different things. Well, maybe not a million, but
I'm sure
a dozen or two.
I'm sure the all kinds of different. Like I was always surprised when you sort of read the forums and you see what people are interested in. You've got people that they just want to salvage. Like they're like, you guys have a space battle, I'll show up and I'll get all the debris and take it and make a profit for it. And then you got other people go, oh, I want to be rescue and recovery when someone breaks down, and someone wants to be a flying ambulance. There's all these things that you get in the real world that you would normally you sort of just think, okay, well, people want to be a pirate or a glory hunty bounty hunter or something, but there's a whole bunch of people that actually kind of have a lot of fun playing a lot of different roles. And I think also there's a lot of people that like the idea of sort of role playing, like a whole setup, right? So it's not just like an organization and they have people that perform different roles in the organization and go together. And I think that's actually going to be one of the coolest things, is to sort of watch, when we get all the pieces there, allowing the players to do it, just to see what happens. It's already, we've just released the Arena Commander, and it's super early. We've got one game mode instead of the 5 game modes we're going to have, and we still got a lot of finessing to do on the flight model. Not so much the physics of the flight model, because that's super accurate, but how the IFCS interprets your commands and different things we can do to make it easier or give you more options to maneuver. But it's just cool watching all these different play and how, what
the
they
hands,
do, the
man.
different styles and what ships they gravitate to. So I can't imagine what it's like when the whole universe is going to be out.
It's gonna be completely insane, and it's gonna be difficult, but it's also a really interesting challenge to try to solve, because you've got so many different play mechanics coming.
Oh, he's coming back with his own hands.
It goes back to that balance thing. It's like striking the right balance so that you don't have people pursue.
I feel like this is like a battle, like an anime battle, where one of them is doing all their moves, got his hands doing his thing, and then he stops, and the other guy's like, "Oh yeah," and he comes in with his hands and he does all this stuff, and they just bounce it back and forth. Keep it going. Go on him, Tony.
Doing one
Get him.
kind of work, and they've got dramatically better potential to obtain better equipment, weapons, loadouts than other people. So you need to give enough possibilities,
get him from this angle.
so that regardless of what you're doing, if you're really, really good at it, you can actually still become really successful within the game. What you don't want is dead end occupations to where you pursue this and there's just no hope that you're ever going to be able to get any of the other cool stuff, because effectively it's going to turn off a lot of players, and that part of the game winds up effectively becoming abandoned.
All right. After passing back and forth the hands game a couple times, Chris is not used to meeting his match when it comes to the hands as being involved. I got to remember that if I meet him at CitizenCon, I need to remember to come prepared. Some people overpower their handshakes to get the one up on you. Some people will shift their weight or stand over you to get up one up on you. Some people will just use their hands while they talk. You got to come back at them, match them. I'm sorry, microphone. Sorry to your ears. All right, so The hands, I actually really love the hands talking. I use my hands quite a bit when I talk too, so it helps. Even when I'm recording stuff, I like have my hands out here and I notice, and I'm like, man, I'm glad I don't do videos with the camera. That'll change someday. So here is a little episode of 10 for the Chairman. Oh my gosh, 10 for the Chairman, my friends. Both the best and worst thing for this game, I think. I wasn't even that involved when 10 for the Chairman was going on, but once I did get involved, I got kind of obsessed, so I did watch quite a few of them. I watched a couple when they were happening as well. And I've seen quite a few doing research for videos, and I gotta say, a lot of the information that I end up finding, a lot of the places where ideas for features started, 10 for the Chairman. And I'm not saying he suddenly spontaneously came up with ideas on the spot for these, but this is where details for things were revealed. And I think one of the best lessons I've learned from watching Star Citizen's development is that you keep things vague until you've got some code. Because a lot of the things that we deal with now that people say are feature creep because they've just never heard of that being a feature in the game are things that you can find in all these kinds of videos. So not to say this is all bad. I think there was a lot of good info shared here. I think this is a great way to get the person who's running the whole game in front of the community. It just probably could have gone a little bit more not hyped. Chris's passion cannot be contained, said Vastin. It has to come out of his hands. Also, no matter who he is talking to, they will start using their hands. It's contagious. They've never really pulled back from anything they've said. They've only made it more intricate, like mining, for instance. Right, and a lot of those things are things that were said 8 years ago that don't come up until maybe a monthly report or a random ISC where something comes up, like the Aaron Halo Belt, for instance. How many people know about the Aaron Halo Belt's gates from somewhere else that doesn't have to do with this YouTube channel? Because I don't think, or any YouTube channel, let's say, any of the normal kind of news channels that might have covered that area, I feel like people don't know that there's supposed to be gigantic gates that separate two sides of the star system. And those are the kind of things that a lot of people know about that have been existent for the entirety of this development, and we've all known are going to be in the game, but because they're not talked about, they just end up getting dropped into the game and people think it's feature creep or they think it's just something coming out of nowhere. So yeah, a lot of that comes from this. It wasn't an ISC. I think it was in one ISC, like 3 years ago? 2 or 3 years ago? 10 for the Chairman makes us feel more connected to the project. Yeah, it does. It's certainly helpful in terms of communication. They've never shied away from that. All right, a wiki deep dive. That'll do it. That'll find him. So here he is talking about the actual market and the economy in the game back on 10 for the Chairman. This is how it started to grow.
Who says, I love trading and being a market tycoon. Freelancer changed my life, by the way. And I'm just wondering what the market in Star Citizen will be like. Will the market carry most/all items in the game? Will prices be player driven? Can players only make profit by transporting goods to another system, or they can buy low, sell high right where they are? So, I mean, the market, it's going to depend on location, obviously what's available, in terms of what people want to sell and what people want to buy on each different planet and even each different sort of landing location / city. So, I would say it would be very unlikely that everything would be available in pretty much, in all places. In fact, that definitely won't happen. Some bigger places like Earth or Terra would probably have a much wider selection. Things like Earth probably have a lot of demand to buy stuff, but probably don't sell that many stuff because some of the manufacturing's moved off planet. Terra may have more stuff that it manufactures, but also obviously has pretty high demand of stuff. And kind of one of the keys to the trading in Star Citizen is the idea of obviously buying and or taking stuff to a place that needs it and going back and forth. And I also wanted to sort of enforce a mechanic that makes you sort of fly around and visit the universe. So you're not always going to be able to get the same weapon in every single store. So for instance, maybe there's this really great manufacturer of ballistic weapons, but it's on this one particular planet, and you have to go there to get that particular brand. Now maybe there's a business to be had going to that brand and buying a bunch of them and bringing them out and sort of setting up shop, selling them somewhere like on Terra or something like that. But that's kind of the dynamic we want to do. The economy itself will be player driven to an extent, so player actions will have an impact on it. If someone comes and sells a whole bunch of stuff, then the demand for that item will not be there for a while until the stuff that's been sold has been consumed. So there will be an effect of player actions on the economy. It won't be overboard in a way that we have a large universe that's simulated with millions of NPCs, and the player base will be a portion of that. So there's no way, or hopefully there's no way, you never know, because you can never say never in online games, that the players could sort of completely unbalance the market, because the plan is they're going to represent about 10% of the people trading in the market, and the rest is AI. But there will be able.
So that's where we started to hear the 10%. I mean, not this specific spot, but like as early as September 2014, you're talking 10% player-driven economy.
They will definitely be able to affect. Players will be able to affect sort of local, like on this system there's no longer there's no demand for iron ore because someone's brought in a whole bunch of it and all that sort of stuff. In terms of making a profit by transporting goods to another system or just buying low and sell right where you are, I think generally you would have to transport stuff. Doesn't mean that you personally have to do it, but you could hire people to take it for you. So you could stay on a planet and run a trading empire without actually having to go anywhere. Probably be a little boring because some of the fun is going there and adventuring and seeing places. But generally the buy.
Don't call my gameplay boring, Chris.
Buy low, sell high stuff is you go and get the iron ore on the mining planet and take it to the manufacturing planet, and then that's how you make a profit.
They keep talking about that too with the economy. The idea that I think that was it.
Okay, next question.
Yeah. So the idea that you are taking the literal components, the literal commodities from place to place based on the demand that comes from ships being manufactured. Crusader is a ship manufacturer. They've got a ton of ships, and they manufacture them. Good job. I put that one together. And you're going to have to deliver a lot of things that are used for ship manufacturing there. So they'll ask for a lot more iron or steel or magnesium or, I don't know, Terranite, whatever they use for those ships. More of it will probably go to Crusader than, say, Microtech. Whereas ArcWarp creates a lot of components and also has, like DJ said in the chat, a ton of people and not really much space to grow food. So, like, they are going to need a lot more food maybe than other places. There are supposed to be this whole balance of supply and demand in reality, or at least in the game simulated, so that the missions we're running make sense and the pushes on the economy make sense. That is only controlled by us 10% though. Now, that being said, that actually works perfectly with this video, which talks about how long it should take to earn a ship. This would be part of the, I think, defining factor of the economy. What's the main thing? People are going to purchase ships and things for their ships. The price it costs to earn a ship is probably what we should judge the reward we get from missions by, how much we have to pay for hangars on a daily basis or insurance, how much even bullets should cost, all probably centers around the price of a spaceship. Because right now we say that the package delivery missions don't give us enough money, right? Because a ship that you want is like 3 million UEC. But what if that same ship was 100,000 UEC? Suddenly the price that you get for a box delivery mission pays for a lot of that. And like, okay, well, that's not bad. Or like, what if mining a certain mineral in the mining gameplay is actually worth it? Because the price of ships is going to go down at some point. What if the ships are really cheap right now and they're actually going to be really, really expensive in the future? I think that's a big determining factor of the economy. So I thought we could listen to this real quick and see what they have to say about that. Cool.
There are a lot of things that go into that.
I can't do much about the volume, sorry.
And we have a lot of discussion with that kind of thing. I'd say that we can't really say exactly which of these ships will cost a certain amount of time, but I can talk to you about how what kind of things go into the price of the ships and what goes into the economy behind them, where players will be to buy these ships. So when we look at the ships, one of the things that we're looking at right now is not necessarily the UEC or the dollars to earn it, but we're trying to figure out the time to earn it. So we look at items in such a way that we don't say like, oh, it's a certain amount of UEC or a certain amount of this or that. We look at it and say, oh, it should be 3 hours to earn this thing, or it should be 1 hour of effort. And of course, if you're a better or worse player, that effort will be, or that amount of time that you'll spend will be more or less, right? You can't just sit around and log into the game and do the wave emote for hours on end and still make the money required to earn, whatever item you're looking for.
Well, I'm out.
Jared's primary strategy right there. So.
Well, not the wave emote. It would be a different emote.
Yeah. We're working on those emotes. Sure.
All right, so continue. Sorry.
So a lot of things go into what causes the ship to have a lot of effort. One of the things that we're really concerned about right now is making sure that the progression is correct. We put out these ship prices to the community, and we had a surprising feedback, actually. Some people thought that the prices were too much, and a reasonable majority thought that the prices actually weren't enough. So the community is kind of divided on this based on the feedback that we've been watching.
Okay, some missing context here. Sorry, this video is from December 4th, 2018. This was right, folks, we couldn't buy ships in game for a while. It was actually a big reason I was just absolutely telling people not to get into it, because this was way before I started making content. It was literally like you could only fly what you paid for in real life. So this was right when they started to add the ability for us to actually buy the ships in the game, rent the ships in the game, just like acquire more ships. So they released the prices, people reacted, and then they started to change them. And I think what he's talking about here is actually a really short term from their perspective. I would have expected him to talk a little bit more about the final idea of how a ship should cost, but maybe he'll get more into that. Let's see.
In the Evocati and on the forums on the website, but really there's a lot more to the economy that we have yet to add to the game, and that's part of the thing that players are probably feeling, is that right now we put these ships out with the amount of effort that we expect the game to take.
Today.
Well, actually, we delivered them with what it will end up being in the future. And that's a very hard target to hit, because there's a lot of things that aren't in the game currently that will be in the game there. And
okay, well, that's kind of important. If that's real, and they're saying the prices that these ships are at right now are real, that it seems like they're very squashed, I feel like the more expensive ships should be more expensive. 30 million seems a bit cheap to me for an 890 jump. It is an 890 jump, right? It's like around 30 million. I don't know. That seems a little bit low. Same with some of the other ships. But maybe they're, I don't know. You can't take one statement like this as law. So they'll probably update the prices to some extent. But I think that 30 million is probably too low for the most expensive ship in the game, at least at this point. Sorry about that. Let's keep going.
The reasoning behind that is that we really wanted to make sure that these the different kinds of things, or the economy has a lot of things going on, and at some point we have to say, look, we got to aim for what the game is going to be, not for what the game is, and that's why we made the decision for this particular thing. We are looking into ways to kind of mitigate the effect of having, a very expensive, fully completed game kind of price on these ships right now, with very alpha ways to earn them. So that's one of the things that we're looking into, and we're currently looking into the best way to do that.
Gotcha. So you're saying have these ships at what we anticipate their final costs to be, and then adjust the ways that we can earn money in the alpha right now to an accelerated rate, so that people don't have to nickel and dime their way up to get them, because there's only so many different opportunities to earn money in the game today.
Exactly. Well, I mean, consider the Stanton system, right? This is a relatively secure solar system, with very few like risky business opportunities to engage in. Like there should be a very low risk, low reward kind of thing going on in the Stanton system. Now, whether or not that's actually the case right now is a different story, but that's kind of what the idea of this is. And so we don't want to have these low level like courier jobs being the kind of thing that will finance a hammerhead, right? Like, so the incomes that players see currently in the game are not sufficient to earn these ships, and we know, because that's what this system is about. This system is not the kind of thing where you can start up a company and do that, where we have to look at the big picture and see what kind of things are going to happen in the very far strategic view of Star Citizen, not just what the game currently offers.
Gotcha. So yeah, I think that's a struggle. We find that struggle in every aspect of Star Citizen. It's the because running a live game development in the middle of our development is presents a lot of unique challenges that most other projects would never encounter, and that's you can't just target everything for how it's going to be in the finished product, because there aren't enough pieces. It's you have mining right now, and you have some cargo stuff, but we're missing salvage, and we're missing a bunch of other ways for you to supplement your income. So targeting everything that we do for how it's supposed to be later doesn't give us a very compelling experience right now. But at the same time, if you adjust everything down right now, then as the game develops, prices start to creep and everything, as things are, and people are like, well, we go back in my day, a Hornet only cost this, and now it costs this and whatever. So there's going to be some struggle there. Always, there's always going to be some inflation, for lack of a better word, as the game continues, and then of course there's just balance adjustments. There's that's if everything that we thought we were doing never changes, and we're just explaining. But then as the game progresses, as people give our feedback back, we're gonna, like you said with the thing, some people thought the Cutlass should cost this, and other people think the Cutlass should cost this, and we of course have our ideas and our internal math and whatever. But the virtue of having a live environment in the middle of our development is that we can listen to our community and take their feedback into consideration in these decisions. So it's a challenge that affects everything, and I'm not surprised to hear that it affects your work on the economy.
It is my work. It doesn't just affect my work. I mean, that's the entirety of what we do.
Hey, I just realized I think this is he's in the video with Tony Zervik here in a minute. We're gonna look at. So yeah, I don't know what I was thinking earlier. Obviously, I don't know what he's saying per se, but there's no way the prices are final, right? As many people are pointing out, the economy's not there. We don't have any way of knowing how much money we're going to be able to lose. They don't have the time sinks in, the money sinks in. All the reasons for us to want to even save money aren't in. So I guess maybe he means the scale of the ship prices. They will eventually stretch out, but right now the way that they're set up with each other is how they want it, and they didn't want to just price them all something ridiculously low or high. I don't know. But that was a little bit of talk about, I was hoping he would talk a little bit more about the idea that a ship is made of certain materials, as is being asked in chat, and those materials cost a certain amount, transportation of them costs a certain amount. How much of that factors into the price of a ship? For instance, if you blow your ship up, let's say the price of replacing a Crusader ship scales as you move further and further from the Crusader, from Stanton, or the price of a Drake ship getting replaced by insurance scales higher and higher as you get further from Magnus, and so on and so forth from where each ship comes from when it's created. How much of that needs to be tracked for that to be a reality in the price of the ship? And is that going to be part of the reality of the price of the ship? Because they're also talking about missions being involved based on where materials need to move to. So how far down is that simulated? I think is something that would be more of interesting to heard, but obviously at that point, again, this is 2018. They didn't have the fullest idea. Yes, I know. 5 years after they had started. But they were still finishing up, I think, the ideas for the concept of the economy. They need someone experienced to lead the economy team. I'm pretty sure Tony Z is experienced. I don't know if he's experienced with MMO economy, but he worked on other games, not ones that I know. But there might be people on the economy team, on the SST team, that have worked on MMO economies. I don't know who exactly is working on that team, but I imagine they would have found somebody who's done it before to be on there. Say they work with what they can get. Not many people are hyped about working for CIG. Yeah, I don't even know. I have no idea what the job market, how the job market views CIG. New Deal is also supposed to be used ships, right? I don't know. Right now we buy new ships there, but it's described as a used ship dealer. Interesting that they call it New Deal. I guess New Deal does kind of make sense. It's a new deal on a used ship. They are controversial, haven't shipped a game, and will not for years. Actual working economy, yes please. I'm sorry, I can't help with that. But I've got all the fun explanations. So this is the first video where we really get into it. And we'll kind of jump through this one a little bit. More so just looking at the interesting bits that they talk about. More actually later on in the demo. And then we'll go from this to the next update that we've gotten. What's up, Chimera? How you doing? I'm doing well, buddy. Thank you. All right. Volume's a little bit better. I hope you could buy used ships at some point.
Can we get those lights brighter?
Ferrister, dude. How's it going? Ciao. Heard a lot of prego over the weekend.
Okay, so hi, I'm Tony Zervek, and I'm the Director of Persistent Universe for Star Citizen. Thank you. I'll be doing the lead vocals tonight, and over here on my right, on the keyboard, is Jake Mealy, our economy designer from Austin.
Hi.
And we're going to be showing you something pretty interesting tonight, and I want to make sure to call out our guitar and bass players back in Montreal.
Jumping ahead.
Should definitely be dynamic. So, for example, if a new field of asteroids rich in valuable commodities is discovered, you'd expect to find a lot of NPC miners in the area, but as the resources are gradually depleted, their numbers should start to fall off. Pirates should gravitate toward areas with a lot of value to plunder and recoil as the amount of security ticks up. So let's look into each of these areas in a bit more detail and see why we've struggled to set up a single solar system and at the same time get a precise understanding of what needs to happen so that we can start moving a lot faster. We'll start with the missions. A Star Citizen mission is fundamentally just a container for code and data, similar in concept to a class in any of a multitude of modern-day programming languages. Inputs can be passed into a mission from either the runtime environment or services to allow for customization. This allows designers to do things like, say, inject the type and quantity of cargo, whether the ship should be damaged or not, and where the ship should be heading, into a generic transport scenario so that we can reuse the same framework for a lot of different situations. Missions can have content tags embedded within themselves to denote their composition, whether they contain security, pirates, freighters, miners, asteroids, or some kind of a combination. Missions can also have thematic tags applied. These don't specify physical content, but rather detail the headline story behind the scenario that a designer created.
So these are missions. I mean, what he's describing is basically the combat beacons that we get right now. So they've got that included, and generally that does run on quantum. It runs based on probability volumes that are currently working. So that's like one of the main, that's like one of the only noticeable things that quantum can do in the game right now.
Wants to buy or sell.
Now this is, I think, where things start to get more important and feel a little bit more like the actual economy. That is economic nodes, obviously with that kind of word in it. Why would it not be important to the economy?
Game, which might be represented via an actual storefront, a kiosk.
Here we go.
So let's talk about economic nodes now. An economic node is an entity within the game, which might be represented via an actual storefront, a kiosk, a UI interface or an NPC that possesses an item manifest detailing the items it wants to buy or sell, storage capacity, and a fair bit of data related to determining prices. This includes refineries that process ore, factories that produce goods, and retail stores where you buy finished products. Factory inputs aren't explicitly denoted, but are instead derived from the production formulae of whatever they manufacture. Prices, what economic nodes are willing to pay for their inputs, and what they want in order to sell, are determined algorithmically based upon the rate of change of their inventory versus the tangent of a pricing curve. This means that they're smart enough to, say, raise the price of what they're selling even when their inventory is low if they detect that they're being resupplied at a sufficient rate to get where they want to be in a reasonable amount of time. So clearly there's some dynamism happening here, which is fantastic. Unfortunately, that's where the good news ends. As with missions, economic nodes don't have any real context in terms of supply and demand, and there's no systemic flow of goods throughout.
Yeah, we definitely know the problem with economic nodes right now. They basically don't exist. So, yeah, that was the other important side, I think, and what we all kind of consider the economy. That supply and demand created by actual stores in the actual game. That's what we're waiting for. We're waiting to be able to say, hey, this store is looking for this amount of rock or iron or some kind of material or metal. And so that's creating a mission for people to go get that, which requires a cargo hauler, which calls for security, which, you know, all that payment of jobs then spurs on the economy in that area more, and it kind of snowballs on itself. But we don't even have that. So obviously there's a lot of problems with that. So like, for instance, the economy won't be zero just because people can buy ships with real money, because there are plenty of things in the game that aren't bought with real money. And there are values that are put onto these things that are basically based on nothing. So like, there could be economy based on the idea that there's a lot of gold on one moon, thus drawing a lot of cargo haulers to the miners. And when we get refining gameplay, a lot of refiners in there as well. That technically is, you know, spurring the economy. It doesn't have to all be based on the ships, but the ships definitely make a big part of it. So now he's going to talk a little bit about how these economic nodes are even made and how they would go into the game.
In an area, and that's a separate problem I'll talk about more when we get to probability volume.
Dude, is he getting more quiet?
So let's take a quick look at what it means to set up an economic node. As I mentioned, there are about 225 economic nodes within the Stanton system, and many of them deal with a lot of different items. Each of these items can specify its own production or consumption formula, along with a lot of other information: storage space, optimal inventory level, price offsets, and much more. This information can be archetyped, but of course the world's a lot more interesting if every economic node is a bit different, so there's still a lot of customization that winds up happening. So now let's take a look at the economic nodes around a typical planetary system. And finally, let's take a look at the economic nodes around the entire Stanton solar system. That's a tremendous amount of data to set up and maintain as we're routinely adding new items and changing prices. And the worst part is that it's all extremely rigid. There's no way to have an economic node increase how much of something it produces or consumes, because those things are attached to formulae that have no understanding of external events. So right now, designers try their best to brute force this stuff, to make it feel like it's a systemic world, even if it's not. If an area is configured to have a lot of pirates, they increase the price offsets and demand for goods at nearby nodes. If the number of pirates is subsequently decreased, or maybe more security is added to the area, then the nodes are updated to reflect that fact. It's a ton of work, and while this sort of hand tweaking does yield something that feels vaguely logical, if static, it's definitely not a real solution, and it doesn't even begin to address the major problems. Is an area of space. So, what is a probability volume? A probability volume is an area of space that contains information detailing what you should see as you pass through the area.
So this is something that's already in the game. I'm pretty sure this is what drives combat beacons. Somebody might correct me, but I do believe these were added last year.
It's an optimization of sorts in that it allows us to achieve a desired effect, a certain number of pirates in an area, or a particular likelihood of encountering a freighter filled with iron ore, without having to burn a lot of computational horsepower simulating things when there are no players around to see it. This is accomplished via linking mission content tags to probability curves that span all or part of the expanse of the volume. So, for example, you can denote that security ships are commonplace near Port Olisar and gradually fall off over a couple hundred kilometers, whereas it's very rare to see pirates who would prefer to avoid security close to Port Olisar, but more likely to see them as you get farther away. There are quite a few different types of curves because until a player actually accepts one of these missions and heads to that location,
He sounded so frustrated there. God, why am I here?
Notes got screwed up here. Anyway, so one of the more interesting types of curves is the spoofing curve, which allows missions to skirt the normal rules, requiring that they can only be created in the proximity of a player. And this is done so that an NPC can request that you travel to them to provide something they desire, in which case, obviously, we can't limit them to only existing in yours or another player's immediate proximity. This is how combat assist is currently handled, and we'll be adding some other things like NPC refuel and NPC passenger transport in the near future. The reason it's called spoofing is because we only keep a small stub active on the back end, which is way more efficient. We've got other types of curves. There are reinforcement curves that allow designers to dictate how quickly backup tends to arrive when you've been identified as a felon. And we also have the ability to modulate that time according to how far away you are from the place you were last spotted and how long ago that was. There are bounty hunter curves, which allow us to link to a probability, to your wanted level so that we can increase the encounter frequency when they'd actually be hunting you, and otherwise keep them very rare. Let's continue on, though, and get a better understanding of how exactly probability volumes work.
Okay, no, that's enough. That's enough on probability volumes. Thank you. So those are like the big things, not the big things. Those are the big small things. The actual concept is where I think kind of going to explain it here.
What we actually want is a dynamic, logical universe. We want the demand for goods and services to be the result of a legitimate economic need, and we must have sufficient.
Oh, is the volume difference really high? 'Cause he's really quiet. Let me turn myself down. Maybe that'll help to balance that out. I still have to gonna try something to try and raise the volume of Chrome. Thank you for the sub, by the way, Plywood Box. Appreciate you.
Context so that we can customize these modular mission templates. NPCs must be able to contribute in helping to turn the gears of the economy from buying and selling goods to creating and accepting missions. The system needs to automatically balance itself so that we can focus on the high-level rules instead of the details. All of this, too, has to be incredibly computationally efficient, which means we need a more focused simulation engine, one that's only concerned with what we need to achieve the desired effect. If we're ever going to reach a point where we can deliver new solar systems in a reasonable amount of time, then we're going to need to make a quantum leap. So,
And that's it right there. That is, I don't know why it is, but that is the only sign that we have for why he named this simulation quantum. And I'll say it all throughout this. The simulation is quantum, not quanta. That's it. His quantum leap statement is the only thing I found that points to the reason that this thing is called quantum.
In a reasonable amount of time, then we're going to need to make a quantum leap. So, what's the solution? Yeah, I'm supposed to flip.
We'll flip over to the end there.
Yep, let's go ahead and flip the screens.
It's exciting, I really promise.
90 SCU on wheels? Yeah. Dang. That's like a train.
So this is quantum, and I know what you're thinking, and I've seen this before. If the visuals look particularly familiar, it's because we started with the solar system map that we released years ago. But this really is a totally different beast. The original star map referenced static data. There was nothing dynamic about it. But quantum is totally different. For starters, it has access to all of the back-end services and can pull whatever data it needs from them. Everything you see on the screen then, that's real-time data pulled from the game. So let's go ahead and take a quick tour of the system. Yeah. Okay, let's go ahead and jump on over to everyone's.
All right, this is just them showing off. Let's jump ahead here and look at the actual explanation of what's going on.
Let's go ahead and jump on over to Ariel, and we can get a view of those probability volumes that I was talking about earlier.
Mark, I couldn't say it better.
And so what you're seeing here, as I mentioned, there are a variety of different types and lots of different content and thematic tags for all these things. So you can see everything from the default tags, you can see the security reinforcement tags, the bounty hunter tags, the spoofing tags. There are a number of these. We'll be adding more. In general, what it's doing is, as I mentioned, it's basically representing things in probabilistic state because it's too expensive for us to fully simulate them.
All right, I'll take that explanation, Zach.
Now let's go ahead and jump over to a shop. Let's check out the Hicks Research Station that's on Cellin. Yeah, we've got to go over to Crusader. And let's go ahead and open up that shop.
Oh, look, here's.
Yep, there's Outpost Correa, and you can see that there's a lot of death around there. And over on the right at the Hicks Research Station, you can see all the things that it buys and sells and what those prices have been doing over time. Now, I suspect I know what you're thinking at this point. This is all very cool, but it doesn't really solve any of the fundamental problems that I mentioned earlier, and that's totally true. So let's clear the board and get to that.
You know, honestly, the comment that this could be an advertisement for devs, I wouldn't be surprised of it.
So,
obviously, this is a simulation they want to get the players excited, but I bet you anything that they also were like, hey, we need to put some stuff out to show devs what they can work on, you know, if they're watching this, and it might work.
And feed back into that all of the player actions into one unified whole. So there's really no difference. There are some optimized areas, the probability volumes that exist in between these two realities, but really this is the full-blown simulation. It takes into account all the player actions. So let's go ahead and start by bringing 1,000 quanta to life. You on the wrong one? So Jake here is cranking the number of quanta up to 1,000, and they're basically going to come streaming in from another system.
Flowing into the universe there.
These are simulated entities. The real significance of this is when you're talking about working out the vast multitude of details that we really need to allow this universe to evolve and feel dynamic, we don't actually need all of the incredibly high fidelity, super computationally expensive stuff that we would get if we were actually simulating these NPCs the traditional way on the server so that they look exactly like they would when you see them. These NPCs don't need to do animations. They don't need to do physics. They don't need to do collision detection. They don't need to do a whole slew of things that we couldn't afford to do. It'd be incredibly expensive to try. And in the end, even if we did it, it wouldn't make the end results any more accurate. So
They also have.
I think that's probably the coolest part of the whole system is the idea that there's a bunch of AI doing stuff out there. And that's what a simulation is, right? But that they're all kept in memory. So like you can run into an AI and they have run into one of your friends or something and can have some sort of a different reaction based on a faction maybe. That's cool stuff. And that is actually supposed to be introduced with the next bounty hunting update, which is something that I'm thinking will end up just coming with 4.0 at this point. But is what we know right now to be the earliest introduction of virtual AI, and which is what he's talking about. He'll go into it deeper in the next video. And probably what is going to drive a lot of the economy. It would be very cool. Can't run into these AI though. Quanta do not carry over into NPCs. That is, he says that they are supposed to transition. The quantum AI or virtual AI will transition into subsumption AI when they come into range of somebody. I guess that's how I understood it. But that's in the next video, so we'll go over that anyways.
personality traits too. Like
Yep.
each one has a little bit of something going on.
Yeah, there are a number of different traits that we're modeling. We're still working out the exact configuration. One of them is ambition, and that specifies how far a quantum can push themselves relative to others, whether in crime or legitimate enterprise. Another one is intelligence, and that dictates what sort of things they can pursue and how well they can do something. Happiness is a measure of whether a quantum, the singular form of quanta, is miserable or content, and unhappy quanta want to change their situation, move to a new location, change occupations, and that sort of thing. Aggression controls the lengths to which a quantum will go to achieve their objective. A business-oriented quantum with a lot of aggression might push their workers harder, trading their happiness for more profit, and as a result have to deal with more turnover. And lastly, criminality, that determines the amount of criminal behavior that a quantum will consider. No criminality equates to a law-abiding quantum. Having a very little means that they might be willing to commit some minor crimes like smuggling or illegal mining. And a lot means that they're open to piracy and murder. They can have possessions, store up money, own a ship or property, have a home. Now, all of these quanta have basically come to rest within the system. And the reason for that is because there's nothing for them to do. There's no reason for them to get up off of the couch. So, let's jump to the next slide.
There's always a reason to get off the couch, Tony.
And yeah,
It's called Widow. You just haven't gotten around the verse enough. So, let's see. Okay, so now I guess he kind of describes the economic system here. Let's see, what's our time looking like? Yeah, we can go with this.
going to add a little bit of interest to the system by adding an aluminum mine to Delamar. So we've now injected a mine onto Delamar, and yet you see the quanta still refuse to do anything, and that's because there's no economic reason for them to do it. There's nothing to do with the ore that they could go and extract. Let's go ahead and open up that card, though. So that card represents the mine on Delamar, and you can see a couple of stats towards the top, quantity and purity. And what these are is basically telling you how much of that material is in that mine, and purity is to some degree a measure of concentration. It effectively details how easy it is to extract it. There are a couple of parameters at the bottom that are temporary. Those will eventually be derived from those top two parameters, but for right now we can override it for some of the testing that we've been doing. So let's go ahead and jump to the next. So now we're going to go ahead and add an aluminum refinery to Crusader. And immediately you will see the quanta start springing to life. And what's happening is they've all figured out that refinery, it wants to build up a stockpile of aluminum. And in order to do that, it needs some raw aluminum ore. And thus, it's willing to pay for it. And so the quanta are seizing upon that economic opportunity, heading out to Delamar, doing the work, extracting that ore, and taking it back to the refinery. And this will continue until it's full. So let's go ahead and open that card up again, and we can.
What I'm curious about here is the refinery is easy to make, right? A UGF. An outpost. We've already seen these. They've literally shown us what refineries are starting to look like in the game now. Like completely, they're not in the actual game, but we've definitely seen them like in these little videos here, where they're doing some filming of engineering, and there's a refinery in the background. So like this kind of stuff is already starting to happen. We've seen outposts, obviously cities and stuff. But what happens when they're talking about a mine? And this mine has a certain amount of aluminum in it. And that aluminum is supposed to be fluctuating in that mine. When players go to that mine, what happened? Did the stream go down? Why an F? Don't give me an F. I don't like Fs in chat. Do we lose YouTube? No, I can't tell. Nobody's chatting. No, you're fine. Okay. Oh, F in chat for Delamar. God, y'all freak me out. Too many technical difficulties. I do realize those entire videos, I know they're staged, but there's still assets in them. Like, those are, those are still the things in the background are things that exist. So my point being, they are starting to produce these things in game, and we have outposts and other stuff. But I do wonder about how those caves are going to be worked with the whole idea that like they have minerals in them. What if it supposedly has a bunch of minerals in it and you go there and there's nothing because players have physically gone there and removed everything that can be mined? These assets are kit bash stuff. Right, but they are assets. So, like, I will, all right. Let's go through the timeline. So the first we saw of these old guys were White Box, I believe. Here we go. So this was the first thing we saw. And obviously this is like work in progress. White Box, not really anything art-wise complete on them, but they do have interaction points and all that kind of stuff. And this is in engine since they're walking as a player. So that's pretty clear. So that's why I'll go and I'll pull this up and I'll say, whenever it pops up, that this kind of thing then makes me think, well, they're clearly further ahead on this kind of asset because they've now got it fully art out in the engine. So I see it as they are getting stuff done further along than what they were doing in 2018. Resource pool of 250 units across all servers, not cool. That'll definitely have to change, I think, with server meshing for sure. You add mine depletion plus mine discovery into the game. So just creating new caves here and there. Hey, Commander Deckard, thank you for the sub on Prime. Appreciate you. Or on Twitch, rather, with Prime. Thanks for the support, mate. All right.
Watch
back to this.
The refined aluminum ore gradually build up. You can also see the number of workers. A few of the quanta, so you see many of them actually acting as miners. There's also a number of them that are working in that refining factory. Refineries can't process this material, without labor, and there's a formula that dictates how much labor is required in order to process this stuff. And so they have to hire a sufficient number of workers in order to actually execute this operation. And so this would continue for quite a while. Let's go ahead and speed up the simulation a bit. And go ahead and keep watching the aluminum inventory. That's finished, so they're now building up their raw ore to basically load up. And after that, the entire economy comes to a halt. The one refiner we've added has no more incentive to buy more. Its storage houses are already full, and therefore it's not willing to buy. Since it's not willing to buy, the quanta have nothing to do. So what we're going to do now is add a factory. But before we do that, let's head on over to the power plant formula. And you can see here that building a power plant, just like refining ore, requires something. It requires 10 workers working for a duration of 60 ticks. And it also, notably, requires 2 units of refined aluminum ore in order to produce 1 power plant.
It's got to be more complicated than that, I promise. So.
Yes. Again, we're building up. So,
I don't know. I feel like that's a pretty standard equation. I like that one. 2 iron plus a laranite. You get a full power supply out of it. I could be an engineer. New mining locations that replace old mining locations. There's actually a part of this where they describe something like that. We should actually jump ahead here to show a little bit more of kind of how this will actually work with supply and demand and stuff. We'll jump up here and start watching from here, and then we'll jump to the next video. How far do I think they will actually be able to take it? I don't know. I have no experience in this kind of thing. You can simulate some pretty complex things these days, and with a team and enough money, you could do some pretty crazy stuff. I don't know how that factors into a game, though, so there are other people that could better answer that than me, I think, who have. I just say what they've said, really, about their own possibilities. You think the video guys just pull anything they got and put textures on it as it fits? They could even have a gray box thing and just drop up material on it, just saying assets shown in those videos show less actual progress than a concept. But so I'm comparing like this stuff to 2019. Like they didn't have anything they didn't even have a concept of those things back in 2019. So I would say that currently they are doing stuff that has to do with those. Like they definitely are doing the work behind it. The video that I showed that had the white box on it was narrated by Jared saying, here are some of the ground assets that we are working on for Pyro. These are supposed to be functional as some of the points of interest that you can find and interact with. So we know for a fact, outside of the video assets, that they're working on these locations. And I think that's much better than back here when they were literally just being placed as little graphics on a screen like this, is my point. Not trying to say that they are done with the assets or they're finished or they're going to be in the game soon or anything like that. Just that they are working on them and they're further along than where they were during these videos. But this is going to be a little bit more about like the actual complexity of the economy and how different materials at different places and different economic nodes require cargo haulers. And that's why cargo haulers are the backbone of the economy. So this will be a little bit more interesting than those other things.
And then ArcCorp L1.
Crusader L4.
Yep, and ArcCorp L1.
Yep.
So now let's go ahead. We just added all of this new aluminum. So let's head back to that Hurston factory and see what aluminum prices are doing there. What's that factory having to pay for aluminum with all this new supply, these new mines, these new refineries? And there you see that the price is starting to fall off.
Okay, I put us into the middle of that with no context. Let's go back a little bit. Sorry.
And lastly, we're going to do Lyria. And if you remember, we already have an aluminum mine on Delamar.
So I believe they're adding in the resources needed for something to be manufactured.
They're telling us we need to hurry up.
You jump ahead, I guess.
You guys want us to hurry up or keep going? All right, so it's like 400 to 1.
And that was when the community fell in love with Tony Z. This is from 2019.
Let's add a couple more aluminum refineries as well to the Crusader L4 and ArcCorp L1.
Crusader L4.
Yep, and ArcCorp L1.
Yep.
So now let's go ahead. We just added all of this new aluminum. So let's head back to that Hurston factory and see what aluminum prices are doing there. What's that factory having to pay for aluminum with all this new supply, these new mines, these new refineries?
Attack them and kill all the new miners.
And there you see that the price is starting to fall off.
Sorry, I was violent.
Can you speed it up a little bit? Let's you see what it does. And if you see, it continues to plummet. So those prices are pretty much falling off a cliff now from all that extra supply that's been brought on without us having to go back and rebalance anything. So let's go ahead and head on over to Cellin. And you can see that Cellin is in very close proximity to Crusader. So you've got an aluminum refinery and aluminum mining, yet there's very little activity. And the reason is because the aluminum at that mine is very difficult to extract. So let's go ahead and adjust the mining time on Cellin from 180 to 120.
There it is.
And what this again reflects is how difficult it is to extract from that particular location. And so you see there now you see a few guys are actually willing to put in the amount of work necessary to extract it. Not all of them, it's still a lot of effort. And this comes back to every one of these guys having their own individual set of traits. So some of them were willing to endure, more risk, more, more effort, that sort of thing. So let's go ahead now and increase the Laranite consumption.
Hurry up a little bit. You can jump ahead to the.
Let's just go with normal pace.
All right.
Drayton, what's up, man?
There you go.
Okay, I think really that's given us enough insight on this. Here's a little bit more we can look at, but you're getting the idea that it's supposed to be physically present in terms of supply and demand and commodities and stuff, but it will be mostly driven by AI. Here's some more of that, though.
Steal from these people, huh?
Yep, we'll bring up the slide.
Oh, okay.
You gotta bring the slide. All right, so now we've introduced some pirates. Let's go ahead, and so you can see that there are 4 pirate kraken. There's the Nova Riders, Low Riders, Nine Tails, and Dusters. Pirates have to return to one of their bases in order to refuel, rearm. Let's go ahead. If you notice, they head to the areas of highest value. Let's go ahead and zoom in there. And you can see that those are missions being created by the NPCs, no different than players would. In other words, you see a lot of deaths on a route that's got a lot of value. And go ahead and hover over some of those contracts. These are contracts that are being thrown out by the NPCs on that route. What's happening?
My favorite thing about this is how the pirates are hanging out off the trade lane. I think that's pretty cool. That's just like a cool little detail. Or maybe they're hanging out on a different trade lane here. I can't tell if this might be its own path.
Happening is the NPCs are basically being, some of the freighters are being picked on by the pirates, the ship is being destroyed, and now that NPC has ejected and needs transport back to civilization. And so they're requesting that. And these are missions that would be fed back into the game that you'd see, and you could wind up accepting these.
And that is the never-ending web that is the quantum simulation. Again, I think it's amazing, but it also sounds really hard to implement into a game. Imagine this trade lane going on, and all of the missions that are spawning around there are missions taken by NPCs or people. So when you get that help beacon mission, it should be spawning here based on the probability of things running into each other, based on those probability volumes we saw. Those missions should be feeding you with extra content to do, but also your friend who is a cargo hauler should be seeing the chance of getting attacked here. It sounds reasonable. It does. I just want to see it all functioning in one place, and we haven't yet. Still clap for it, though.
Let's go ahead and take a look at Hurston, the coolers and quantum drives.
Check this out. This is where they're operating out of, you guys. Right. What do you want to go check out?
The Hurston, let's look at what happened to the cooler and quantum drives.
Oh, yeah.
So since we've now got a lot of pirate activity on that route, we want to see what's happening to the cost of some of those goods.
For a cool $500,000 UEC, you can get yourself your own power plant.
Yeah, I can barely see that.
It's actually normal. Piracy is really terrible for economics, you guys. So
This is like, I wouldn't mind them just releasing that as a game. How many of you guys play SimCity or like Civ or something where you just like watching simulations run? I think this would be a cool game on its own. Like, we make this like a Arena Commander module maybe or something. Spreadsheets Commander?
So let's go ahead now.
you can really see it over at the coolers where it started at like a really reasonable thing.
Stellaris.
Yeah, that's pegged. It's the scale. So basically, they were down around 1,000, 2,000, and now they just absolutely skyrocketed in price because so many of the freighters moving, whether it's supplies or moving, the finished product from one location to another, are now being intercepted. And these quanta, as I mentioned earlier, it's like they have various traits, and some of them are very risk averse, and they won't go down routes where there's a significant chance of death. And so to counteract some of this danger, let's go ahead and bring in someone to fight the pirates. So here comes some security. And what you'll notice is that security is drawn to areas of conflict where there's a lot of deaths and such. So they're going to wind up gravitating towards those areas where there's a lot of piracy. And there you can see them. Go ahead and over. Go speed it up a little bit. Not 200. It's 200 too fast. It's difficult to tell what's going on. And if you notice, by the way, the police will wind up patrolling an area, so they're in constant motion, whereas the pirates basically are enabling quantum interdiction fields. That's why they're basically picking a route on, they're picking a particular location on the route between, between two locations, and they're basically, lying in wait. And the security, which doesn't know exactly where they are, is scanning the area looking for them. And so what you notice here is that the pirate situation is starting to look a lot better now that security's shown up. And you would see this reflected over in the prices. And so what you have here is a perpetual game of cat and mouse, to where the pirates look for the areas where they can reap the largest rewards with the least amount of risk, and security is then drawn to them. And as soon as you get enough pushback from the system in terms of security, then the pirates look for more opportunistic pastures.
Everything that we're seeing here is on a really big scale. From here, we actually move forward to the next update, which takes place in 2021. This is one of 3 of the major updates on the quantum system, with this being the last here. But what we just saw was taking part on a very large scale. I'm actually going to jump towards the end of this video to show you the exact same thing, just out of, because I want that context to be there in our head. It's really important with this discussion we're about to have with probability volumes. Everything that he just said was taking part there with the whole security counterbalancing piracy, counterbalancing traders, and how those numbers will reflect one another in inverse values. That all takes place on a micro level around each location. And that's what the probability volumes are. So we're going to jump straight into that here now. Sven, the loss of those prices to systems, it's actually something I covered on a podcast episode back then. I brought in the guys over at Cornerstone who track a lot of that data. Actually, Cornerstone and the Armory, Space Coder, who also does videos on YouTube, brought them both onto different podcasts where we talked about those things changing and how that might lead to some changes in the economy, which we've also seen talk about in the monthly reports. So that's why I am so frustrated with not hearing much about this over the last few months, because I think we are past due for an update on the economy, especially given what he says about this stuff in these videos. I think in this video we're about to listen to, he says that there's going to be some updates. So I'd like to hear more. I think they're getting ready to do some stuff with the economy, but we just don't know what yet. Now, here are the probability volumes in a much more complete and easy to understand presentation.
Probability volume around Port Olisar. You can see that piracy,
Sorry about the volume. We're going back up.
the red curve, and security, the blue, are inversely related. All things being equal, if you increase the amount of security, you'll get less piracy, and vice versa. Security tends to congregate closer to the landing facilities and dissipate as you get farther out, and thus piracy tends to gradually increase with distance. The likelihood of an encounter is represented by the height of the curve at that distance. Notice that the chances of running into a freighter, the green curve, is pretty much constant, because once a ship has decided to make the journey to or from Port Olisar, it's committed. They've already decided whether or not the risk is worth the reward of traveling the full route. I'm now going to activate the lockdown phase of this event, which is going to crank up the amount of piracy in the selected area and overwhelm security. The red curve, piracy, now has a much larger average height, equating to an increased encounter probability, and because pirates now greatly outnumber security, the curve pushes in much closer to the landing zone. The criminals are emboldened because there's no longer sufficient security to deter them. The blue curve, security, looks identical, although quantum will, over time, start adjusting the economic levers to gradually increase the amount of security to combat the threat by offering greater rewards. Increased piracy has had an immediate impact, though, on freighter traffic, which has dropped precipitously. This means that the local economy will start to seize up. They won't be able to import food, medicine, fuel, or whatever else they need, and they won't be able to export whatever goods and services they produce. All of these knock-on effects are only possible because designers will now be able to nudge the economic gears in proper systemic fashion. Let's test one of these knock-on effects. Now that we've adjusted the encounter probabilities, let's see what that does to quantum travel in the area. I'm going to once again bring up a game client, this time so that we can watch an Avenger Titan jumping to Port Olisar. This is a short jump, and the chances of interdiction would typically be very slim. Now that we've injected a much larger pirate presence around that location, however, that's no longer the case. We got ejected from our jump as soon as we got within range of those elevated pirate probabilities, which means that getting to Port Olisar just got a lot more difficult and time-consuming, and will remain that way until the threat is addressed. We're now to the point where we can allow programmatic modification of these data structures, and quantum will soon start adjusting these automatically so that all sorts of things within the universe start to ebb and flow. What all of this really means is that even when you know that you can buy medical supplies dirt cheap at one location and sell them for a hefty profit at another, we can finally start to adjust some of the systemic elements to justify the disparity. In short, if you wanted to take advantage of Port Olisar's elevated prices right now, you'd have to fly the last mile at conventional speeds, and we'll probably see quite a bit of combat. That's going to drive up how long it takes you to make the run. You're probably going to burn quite a bit more ammo and require more repairs than would otherwise be the case, and you might want to think about recruiting some armed escorts to help you through the dangerous areas. Once the risk abates, once players in Quanta have dispatched enough of the pirates so that travel within this area returns to normal, you'll be able to much more easily deliver medical supplies to Port Olisar, but of course that increase in supply will quickly shrink the price differential.
All right, so that gets into dynamic event territory, which isn't really what we're going over today. If you do want to check that out, though, this is called Quantum Quasar and Virtual AI, and it was released in 2021, so go check that out. What we're going to do now is get into virtual AI. We're going to talk first about quantum, and then we're going to talk about quanta, which are the things inside of quantum, and then we're going to talk about how they have their own personalities, virtual AI, and how these different things affect the game.
Its purpose is to allow review examples so that the underlying concept can be made more clear. First, a quick review. Quantum is a simulation of the game universe, and its purpose is to allow things, the price of goods at a given shop, the amount of piracy near a landing zone, or what missions are being offered, to evolve and change over time in logical and realistic ways. It does this by simulating hundreds of thousands of lightweight NPCs called quanta, whose AI logic is focused on just those aspects needed to produce the required information. Based upon a small list of attributes, each quanta makes its own decisions using the same resources, shops, and jobs as players. The simulation will need to calculate many millions of decisions per minute, and thus the AI behavior of quanta is focused on the most economically impactful details, which lets quantum focus all of its processing power on just those things that truly matter. Every quanta possesses its own unique set of attributes that influence how well it performs and how it perceives opportunities. The initial implementation of attributes will have two main categories, proficiencies and traits. Proficiencies act like a multiplier on how well quanta perform a given task. Different jobs will require different proficiencies. They will perceive
much easier to get
payout
graphically
of that job to be higher. To illustrate the concept, let's take two jobs on either end of the aggression scale and suppose, for now, that they pay out the same. Now, let's create a quanta with a...
This is going to be pretty important, by the way, because this is going to factor into NPC crew, AI crew, getting NPCs to follow you around and stuff. I think it will also be affected by this, but we'll see to what extent.
An average aggression rating. This quanta is no closer to the aggression alignment of factory worker than they are to security, so it's no surprise that for this quanta, the payout for both jobs looks the same. However, as we decrease the aggression rating of this quanta, we can see that the perceived amount of money for both jobs changes. Again, the actual pay hasn't changed at all, only the perceived value from that quanta's point of view. It's still possible for the quanta to choose security, but in this case, security would need to pay 4 times as much. If we change this quanta's aggression trait to be very high, the opposite happens. Now, the aggressive security job looks like it pays much more, and the peaceful factory worker jobs appear to pay much less. Of course, jobs have more than a single trait to distinguish themselves. Suppose we take another aggressive job, pirate. With just one dimension, the pirate job would look just as lucrative to this quanta as the security job. We can differentiate between these two jobs by adding the morality trait and putting both of these aggressive jobs on the proper place on that scale. Now that all jobs have a unique combination of trait alignments, we can watch the perceived payout for all 3 of these jobs change, even though, in this case, all jobs actually pay the exact same amount. We're currently experimenting with 4 different traits, but expect to add at least a few more over time to help ensure that quanta do not congregate around the highest paying job at any given moment, and instead, just like a real population of individuals, all perform their own unique mental calculus to determine what looks most appealing to them, and in effect gives us the nice distribution of workers that we want. The quanta...
And that would obviously change based on the system. So in Pyro, you'd end up having more AI that are interested in being kind of dicks, you know?
Simulation that we ran at the last CitizenCon was implemented in TypeScript, a relatively slow language that limited us to less than 10,000 quanta. All of that logic has since been rewritten in C#, and a lot of time and effort invested into optimizing the threading and resource locking, which wound up increasing performance by more than 2 orders of magnitude. Stanton is one of the more complex solar systems and will require about 50 to 100,000 quanta in order to achieve the required fidelity, which means we've got a lot of extra headroom without any additional performance tuning to support upcoming solar systems like Pyro. Much like a real economy, quantum produces a tremendous amount of data, and there are countless ways to adjust the simulation. Finding a combination that produces the desired results is difficult, and in order to solve this problem, we created Odin, a plugin for the Python-based JupyterLab environment. Odin is a powerful web-based tool that allows for real-time data interpretation of the game's dynamic and complex economy based on the actions of both players in the live game and quanta. Here I'm using Odin to simultaneously show all of the graphs related to the economy of aluminum, where it's mined, refined, manufactured, and sold around the Stanton system. It's a bit overwhelming, so I'm going to refine the search by adding the word buying to the Graph Explorer. Before seeing the actual graphs, we can preview which ones our search has identified, which is very useful in more complicated search scenarios. In this case, though, we've already whittled things down to a manageable size, so I'm going to jump to the actual graphs. Everything looks pretty healthy. You can see the cyclical nature of commodity prices, a sign that we're on the right track and getting the economic modulation we want. All of these graphs are updated from the simulation in real time, and we can zoom in on particular time periods of interest, which is invaluable when trying to figure out exactly why the availability of a critical resource dried up or the price of something went through the roof. With such a complex system, it's often difficult to predict what sort of information we might want to inspect, and Odin was therefore designed to be extremely flexible and adaptive. One particularly powerful data analysis tool that we developed allows us to view the flow of goods and services from a high-level perspective. We call it the Lazé graph, and it can dynamically target economic flows and animate transitions so that we can visually see how things change over time. Here I've selected a number of different product nodes, and you can see all of the economic relationships for those items laid out on the graph. The graph allows us to switch between several key flows, like the volume of goods, the flow of UEC, and even the value density of specific routes in the universe. The nodes are ordered by greatest to least economic activity, and changes over time will reorder them. We can thus detect important shifts in the economy simply by observing how the nodes adjust their position. This tool can inspect both real-time and historical data, so we can step back in time and see the progression of factors that caused a problem to develop and what could be done to remedy it. When inspecting a segment of time, you can see elements of the economy phasing in and out, depending upon whether or not they were relevant during that period. Often we'll want to dig into a particular material to investigate how that material flows throughout the economy. With the Lazé graph, we can choose a material like aluminum, and then all of the items that metal is used to construct, which immediately gives us an intuitive view of the relationships between manufacturing recipes and system-wide logistics from a bird's eye view. Here, it looks like most of the raw aluminum in the economy is being funneled into items that are being sold in shops on Crusader and ArcCorp. After a while, though, the shops at Crusader run short of inventory and stop selling such goods, and all the sales move to Hurston and ArcCorp. As new materials, recipes...
Okay, I'm cutting us off here. We're going to move forward to virtual AI because I do want to show you guys some of that stuff before we move on to the next update. This is also kind of showing how exploration in AI will work, something that you were talking about with finding new mines and stuff like that. So that basically was just talking about how these simulated AI in the background will be doing different things. While they're all AI, they're not all built the same, and they'll want to be involved in something or another based on what kind of AI they are. And this is a big part of what differentiates different star systems, different planets, different space stations, and how you'll find different missions in those places.
Necessary data, we can flip a switch to activate it. Previously, when Quanta traveled to a planet or a moon to mine a resource, they picked a random location on the surface. This meant that Quantum wasn't yet capable of generating the spatial fidelity we needed so that we could properly determine exactly where NPCs should and shouldn't be found. The resource service that we completed last year, however, provides Quantum with an API that not only gives it access to this information, but also enables those amounts to be modified so that as players in Quantum mine an area, it will gradually be depleted. To demonstrate, I brought up a planet. Now, I'm going to highlight the location of all of the gold ore. Players in Quanta, of course, would not have this information, and to represent that fact, I'm going to place a shadow over everything. You can...
Okay, I love this. So, like, this starts to get a little bit into data running as well, because somebody has to find this stuff, And before everybody else knows about it, they have to run that data back, sell it, give it up to the system, make it public. I don't know. And this concept on its own gets really interesting, but I think this is a really cool demonstration of how information can grow if they are dynamically adding new points of interest like we were talking about in chat.
You can see a single quant exploration ship approaching the planet from the right. As it travels across the surface, it will unveil the quantity and location of that ore, visually represented by removing the shadow, and then broadcast that information to other quanta within its organization. It has discovered a huge vein of valuable ore, and quantum miners have now started arriving en masse to extract it. They're focusing predominantly on those areas where the concentration is known to be highest, although they'll also consider things like the amount of risk in a given area, perhaps caused by a player or NPC organization fighting to control that region. I'm running this at an accelerated rate, and you can see that the amount of ore at that first large site is declining rapidly. The explorer has now discovered a second field of gold ore near the equator, and because the original deposit has now been mined so extensively, what remains is more time-consuming and difficult to extract, and is thus relatively less attractive. The quanta have figured this out, and most of them have started to focus their attention on the newer site. Taken together, these new features allow Quantum to generate a lot more detailed information, which will in turn result in a better and more realistic gameplay experience. Quantum will know where exactly on the surface of a planet NPCs might be found and what they should be doing. It will understand the value of knowledge and factor.
All right. So from here, he tells us what we're supposed to be getting from this system in the near future, back when we were doing this video.
Of time and effort here. Point. We're going to do a bit more testing before we enable it to start injecting that data into the live game, though, and even then we're going to start very small and limit the focus to a few select areas so that we can work out any problems. The first couple of commodities for which Quantum will gain the ability to dictate the price will be fuel and repair materials.
These have been added to the game.
To allow it to control the amount of piracy and possibly transport freighters and security in a few test locations. But keep in mind that until more of the data behind the curtains is exposed, the modulation may at times seem a bit arbitrary. We're going to be more aggressive with service beacons, and we'll soon move most of that responsibility, the type of beacon being offered, the location, the reward, and the difficulty, to Quantum. Our primary focus.
So those things are like partially included in the game at this point, but they're not super noticeable. They're not obvious to the player right now, which I think is part of the problem. But now let's talk about virtual AI. This is, I think, one of the bigger parts of the economy outside of supply and demand. And this is supposed to be the biggest feature coming with the Bounty Hunter V2 update that we hopefully are getting at the end of this year, but I think it's probably becoming more of a 4.0 kind of thing.
Star Citizen's AI architecture is broken up into 3 distinct levels. The high-fidelity characters that you see in the game execute subsumption logic on a server, and this is far and away the most computationally expensive of the 3 types of AI. It's got a similar sense-think act cycle as the other AI, but because you can see the NPCs as they execute their tasks, there's often little to no potential for cheating or simplification. Something as simple as sitting in a chair requires a lot of item searching, animation, raycasting, collision detection, and more. This is a problem because in Star Citizen we're trying to simulate entire solar systems, and we can't afford to execute this kind of expensive logic for tens of thousands of characters that players can't even see. So we do what many games do and temporarily suspend any AI that's not in proximity to a player. This creates another roadblock though, because you can't effectively simulate an economy when portions of it are constantly being shut down and restarted, and it's the fundamental reason why Quantum exists. Merging these 2 AI extremes, subsumption and Quantum, solves our basic problem. NPCs look and act exactly as you'd expect when you can see them, and the universe's economic wheels always remain in motion. There's one major flaw, however, with this solution. The heavyweight subsumption NPCs that you can see and interact with don't execute any AI logic when you're not around, and thus they're severely limited in what they can do and when they can do it. Solving this issue is the responsibility of a middle tier of systemic logic that I call virtual AI. Virtual AI allows virtual NPCs, VNPCs for short, to seamlessly transition back and forth between the fully realized and physical world of subsumption and a far more efficient intangible back-end ether where they retain the ability to interface with elements of the systemic architecture just like a player. This technology is going to unleash a lot of new and exciting gameplay, but it's going to take more than a few sentences to properly explain what I'm talking about, so let's walk through it all in more detail. This is the Stanton solar system.
Some jumbled sentences too, that was hard to follow.
You can see the 4 planets, ArcCorp, Hurston, Microtech, and Crusader. I'm going to zoom into the Crusader planetary area.
Sorry,
and
Tony.
You can see its 3 moons, Yela, Daymar, and Cellin, and the space station Port Olisar. You can imagine looking at that station, hundreds of NPCs going about their lives. This is how you think of the universe, always in motion, always changing, always real, regardless of whether you're actually looking at it or not. As I mentioned, though, that's an illusion. We can't afford it. When you're not looking, the server deactivates and unloads a lot of unnecessary baggage, but a wide assortment of backend services retain knowledge of everything that really matters and provide an active interface to those systems. NPCs outside of landing zones are treated differently. Quantum accumulates statistical information for where NPCs should reside and what they should be doing from its quanta, which allows us to determine how often you should see a pirate or what a freighter you run into should have in its cargo hold. These areas are called probability volumes, and the important thing to note is that the NPCs they create are ephemeral. They pop into existence for a brief moment so that the area you're viewing looks like what Quantum says it should, and once they're sufficiently far from any players, they're completely and forever destroyed. I'm going to add a player here, which you can see off to the left. As they pass by Daymar, they're in range of a probability volume that, eventually, decides they should encounter a pirate. So, a pirate is created and engages the player, and after a bit the player decides that they're outmatched and decides to run. Once they're sufficiently far from that NPC, it's destroyed. It doesn't persist in any fashion, and you'll never see them again. The player continues traveling to Port Olisar, and the translucent green wireframe indicates that the area isn't loaded on the server, and thus the subsumption AI isn't active. I'm going to add a VNPC in a moment, but first let's quickly recap what makes them so different. VNPCs always execute some form of AI logic, regardless of whether or not they are in proximity to a player. Virtual AI is extremely lightweight and computationally efficient, stripping out all of the expense related to visuals and unnecessary details, yet retains the full ability to interact with the game in the ways that truly matter. Virtual AI executes within a backend service and can thus easily be scaled and doesn't put any load on the servers. VNPCs can seamlessly transition back and forth from lightweight, back-end-driven AI entities to full-blown, subsumption-driven NPCs, and are thus indistinguishable from an NPC that really did execute expensive subsumption logic all the time. Lastly, VNPCs gradually build up their own unique histories as they live out their lives. They evolve. Okay, so back to the example. Once the player gets close enough to Port Olisar, that area is streamed into existence, loaded onto a server, and the NPCs initialized to resume whatever they should be doing at that time of day. Now I'm going to introduce a VNPC pirate near the player, and they're going to immediately attack. After a few moments, the VNPC comes out ahead in this battle, and the player is killed. Because their crime was committed in range of an active comm array, it's recorded in their character history, along with the time and location of the felony. An upcoming tracking app will allow you to access information like this if you've registered with the local authorities, so that the digital footprints players and VNPCs leave behind can be tracked. This VNPC's name is Dragon, and since they're now wanted in this jurisdiction, the comm array has affixed a real-time marker to his position. With the only player in this area dead, the server now streams Port Olisar and the comm array out, but as I previously noted, VNPCs aren't destroyed like a regular NPC created from a probability volume, and their logic isn't suspended like an NPC at a landing zone. Instead, VNPCs simply transition from their physicalized state, where authority over their actions is controlled by subsumption logic executing on a server, to their native ethereal state, where their virtual AI executes on the back end. Dragon now begins to exit the area, and the comm array continues to track his position until he passes out of range, at which point the real-time information converts to a last known position report. He's decided that he needs money and he's a bit risk-averse, so he elects to head all the way out to Yella, where there are quite a few transport freighters carrying valuable ore and little in the way of security. Okay, Dragon has arrived at Yella's asteroid field and has now crossed back into range of another active comm array, so his real-time position is now once again being reported as indicated by both the character history and the tracking marker. There aren't any players in this area, and thus none of this is streamed onto a server. Everything you're seeing is a result of a variety of different services communicating with one another. VNPCs trigger probability volumes just like players, and Yella's shows that there's quite a bit of freighter traffic in this area. So, Dragon won't have to wait very long before he generates an encounter. There's one. Dragon just caused the creation of a freighter, which itself becomes a VNPC so that it can react to what's happening via its own virtual AI. Dragon now engages the freighter. He starts firing on it. He's still within range of an active comm array, and thus this latest crime is added to his character history. He's now wanted for both murder and piracy, and the bounty on him just jumped from 6 to 10,000 UEC. Increasing the size of their rap sheet and the price on their head is one of the simplest forms of VNPC evolution, and over time we'll look to add additional ways for VNPCs to grow and increase their influence, from recruiting followers in an attempt to become a shipping magnate or a crime boss to offering their own missions. The captain of that freighter isn't going to surrender so easily. He's broadcast a combat assist service beacon that players can choose to accept, and he's offered a 3,000 UEC reward for his protection. Unfortunately for him, he's pretty heavily outmatched and he's quickly destroyed, causing the service beacon to expire before anyone can come to his aid. Bits of information like this are fed back to Quantum, and in sufficient quantity will cause all sorts of things to change. How much security patrol missions in that area pay, what transports that have to travel through that area will demand as a risk premium, and how much a ship in distress will offer for someone to come to their aid. The freighter's destruction has left some debris and possibly a few items of value, so if a player had already been en route, they might arrive to find the aftermath. Another murder has now been attributed to Dragon, and the bounty on him just once again jumped, this time from 10 to 14,000 UEC. He took a bit of damage from that encounter and is eventually going to need some repairs. A harder working pirate might look to plunder a few more freighters before heading back, but Dragon's personality attributes indicate that once he's got enough cash to cover the basics, he's more interested in drinking and gambling than piracy. So he leaves the area, and once again the real-time location tracking ceases once he's out of range of the comm array. He's heading back to Port Olisar, which is the closest location that has everything he wants. A fence to sell his stolen goods, shops to repair and restock his ship, and a bar where he can spend the remainder of his cash. The comm array near Port Olisar has been disabled, which means that Dragon's position isn't updated upon approach. The area remains devoid of any players, and thus it's still not streamed into memory. Dragon can therefore remain in his ethereal state and avoid a lot of computational expense related to maneuvering his ship, but he still needs to interface with the air traffic control service to request a landing pad and transition from his ship to the station. Services like this are always fully operational and accessible to VNPCs.
Yo, Dragon, they don't like murderers there, what?
Request is logged to his history though, so while the disabled comm array would make it a bit harder for a bounty hunter to track him, there are lots of other ways by which locational information on a character can be obtained. Dragon needed to refuel and repair his ship, and you can see those actions reflected in his history as he interfaces with the shop service that controls those operations. When a VNPC transitions to a landing zone that's streamed in, the virtual AI service that drives their logic temporarily cedes control of the character to the NPC scheduler that specifies who resides at what location. This is the same foundation upon which
NPC scheduler, I think, is something that we've heard, or at least is on the progress tracker. That's one of the things being worked on alongside virtual AI and the quantum simulation. So that's pretty important for making sure that people are actually in cities and space stations and stuff when you get there. Whoops.
The dynamic populations feature will be built, except that it will be quantum instead of the virtual AI service dictating the changes in the population. The end result is that if a VNPC is assigned to a landing zone and you're at that location, you can run into them like any other NPC. Dragon is now hanging out in the local bar, which was added to Port Olisar for the purposes of this demo. If you were to walk into the bar at this moment, he'd be physicalized with the rest of the environment and you'd actually see him there. Dragon eventually gets his fill of entertainment, or maybe he just runs out of money. Either way, it's back to work, and he'll be jetting back to Yellow to try and prey on more unprotected cargo ships. So he contacts air traffic control to get clearance to leave the area and departs. The same player that Dragon first encountered and killed is looking to exact some revenge, though, and claim the big bounty on Dragon's head. They've surmised that there might be a pattern to Dragon's movement and think that he might head back out to Yella. So they position themselves between Port Olisar, where they know that Dragon just left, and Yella and activate a quantum interdiction field. Dragon, still in his lightweight ethereal form, initiates a quantum jump from Port Olisar to Yella and, just like a player, routes that movement through the probability volume service that is responsible for interdictions. Once he gets within range of the player's interdiction bubble, his jump is interrupted, and he transitions from executing virtual AI on the back end to a full-blown subsumption-driven AI executing logic on a server, so that the two of them can battle it out. If the player once again gets the worst of it, they might decide to change up their tactics a bit and wait to see if Dragon soon returns to Port Olisar, where they could try to sneak up on him on foot.
Okay, so that is virtual AI. It's pretty in-depth. It's going to be a big system. And that's why it's taken a long time, I guess. As somebody said, it's probably a big reason why overall a lot of the updates just haven't come out, with mission givers haven't come out. Virtual AI is probably going to drive a lot of that because it also is supposed to be kind of like, anybody play Shadow of Mordor or Shadow of War games? Those games did a really good job with something called the Nemesis system, where if you attacked an NPC or had some interaction with an NPC, they would remember you when they come back across you. That's supposed to be part of what drives virtual AI, how they become mission givers, how they remember you, they maybe give you a mission because you've been returning to them, that kind of stuff. So There's a lot that goes into virtual AI, and if you didn't catch it during this whole demonstration, he was basically going over what Bounty Hunting V2 is going to be. This is what it's all about. Using the normal systems that the game offers, like ATC, comm arrays, and refueling and repair and stuff, to track down a bounty, find them, apprehend them physically, put them in your ship, take them back to the office and turn them in, as opposed to now, where it's just go find someone, shoot them, and kill them. So finally, the last major update we have on this system is, it was actually at the end of the Stream of Thought talk at the end of 2022. This is CitizenCon 2021, I'm sorry. So this is the same year, just a little bit later. We didn't get any updates on it. Last CitizenCon, which I thought was a really bad idea, but we're still waiting to hear more about it. Here is the last thing that we got to hear, though. It's coming up here at the end of this talk.
These missions will drive the development of AI following, so once complete, we'll be able to leverage that throughout the rest of the game.
Ooh, is that passenger transport stuff? Do kind of want to hear what that's about first.
Push it out the door.
Well, Tony, we're at the point where we have a working prototype in which AI can be asked to follow, wait, and take a seat aboard your ship. And even with this rudimentary setup, we've been able to flesh out the mission flow to a very detailed degree, and have made a lot of headway into planning the dialogue requirements. We've gone some effort to make sure that the mission is more than a delivery mission where the box has legs, so the client has patience that can wear thin, with your tip and rating being calculated based on your performance. We'll also be developing AI behaviours to deal with what happens should the player decide to kidnap them. The rescue mission module has been designed in such a way that it can work in conjunction with others like Infiltrator, meaning that we can easily inject some obstacles in your way, like a base full of captors. These missions will drive the development of AI following, so once complete, we'll be able to leverage that throughout the rest of the game.
Frustrating, because we still are waiting for passenger transport missions.
I want to pivot now and give an update on some of the systemic functionality that I detailed last spring. I said that we were soon going to have quantum controlling a few select bits of the universe and that we were going to be very measured in the rollout. We remain on track to activate these changes with 3.16 at the end of the year, and this initial release will allow quantum to dictate 3 encounter frequencies, the prices of 3 commodities, and everything related to Combat Assist Service Beacon.
I believe that did not happen, and we instead got that update in 3.17, if I'm not mistaken.
As the simulation is refined and more of the linkage to the game is completed, we will expand the scope of these early tests and enable quantum to play an ever larger role in shaping the universe. So let's go over how the gameplay experience is set to change. Probability volumes dictate how the likelihood of an encounter type varies within that region, and historically that information has always been static. Dynamic events, introduced in early 2021, allow that data to be changed by mission logic, but still don't support systemic modulation. You can see the frequency curve for pirate activity in red on the screen here, and the long and short of it is that no matter how many pirates you, your friends, or the entire community kill, the likelihood of encountering a pirate at this spot right here would always be about 5% per minute, and farther out, right about there, the odds would drop to 2%. Now, let's see what happens when we activate quantum and it starts to provide real-time guidance to the probability volume service that controls this information and distributes it to the game servers. As is often the case with such demonstrations, the simulation is running at an exaggerated rate of speed so that I can easily illustrate some key points. The first thing you'll notice is that the fixed pirate curve just flatlined because quantum says there aren't currently any pirates in this area. There are some valuable materials on the surface of Cellin though, and that's starting to attract some quantum miners represented in green. The distribution of the miners determines the shape of the green curve, and the quantity determines the amplitude. With the value of the ore available on Cellin sky high and no threat in sight, the number of miners continues to increase, and you can see the encounter curve changing to reflect that. Pirates are drawn to high concentrations of wealth with minimal security though, and are starting to swarm into the area, and as they do, you can see the red pirate curve adjusting. Quanta security, represented in blue, is drawn to conflict, and is thus often a lagging indicator of criminal activity. So at this point, there are several distinct things happening. The number of miners in the area is still increasing, but the rate of increase has slowed dramatically as they start to weigh the increased risk of piracy. The number of pirates is still increasing because there's still sufficient value in the area to attract them and not yet sufficient security to dissuade them. The number of security forces continues to rise because the pirate problem is raging out of control, and thus security pay in this area has gone through the roof. This trend continues for a while until finally the risk of piracy gets too high and the quantity of miners starts to drop. The pirates are doing their own independent mental calculus and still see sufficient value in the area, even once the miners start to fall off, to continue increasing their numbers, but that simply speeds up the rate of decline in the miners, while at the same time, the threat from security continues to grow. So, eventually, the number of pirates in the area begins to fall off as well. As the threat of piracy begins to subside, the impact gradually ripples through the economy, lowering the rate of pay and demand for security services. The quantity of security forces streaming into the area eventually peaks too then and begins to decline. If you watch the curves, you'll see a rhythmic action to it all, with miners looking for high-value ore in safe areas, pirates searching for unprotected wealth, and security chasing conflict. 3 different but very interdependent calculations. The system is always searching for equilibrium, and just as in a real economy, sometimes overshoots a bit in one direction or the other, which ultimately equates to opportunity for the thinking player.
So that was like basically, we just saw 3 different versions of probability volumes now. The first one in 2020, and then 2 different versions in 21. This looked like it was running a little bit more actual simulation than the first or the second one we saw. But overall, it's the same idea. It all makes sense. Security doesn't like pirates. Pirates don't like security. Cargo haulers don't like either, but they have to put up with both. We all know how it works. Pedro, thank you for gifting that sub out to Zach. Been helping me figure out why quantum is the way it is. I do appreciate that context. And Polygon, welcome to the carrots, my friend. Thank you for becoming a supporter there on YouTube. You guys both get the exclusive videos on the main channel if you want to check those out. What is the real time span on that last scenario? I would assume this is like over the course of hours, right? Because this is a lot going on. It looks like whatever is being simulated, it's happening over the course of seconds. But he said this was sped up quite a bit. So I don't know if we have an exact idea of how long this might have taken. But the following would be, I believe, what has actually been added into the game, which would be the service beacons. And a lot of people, somebody said this was the main way that they make money in the game now. This is something that I took part in. If you look at my last gameplay video with no ship gameplay, this was one of the things that we really used to make a lot of money. So this stuff is kind of working in game. I'm not sure how well it's being simulated, but it is at least something that we can do. Could be several in real life days. It could be a lot longer.
NPC combat assist service beacons have historically been generated via probability volume data and were thus every bit as static as the...
Actually, yeah, now that I think of it, that last scenario was probably over the course of days or weeks. Because the way that your mining situation isn't going to change that fast in the course of hours. So that was probably a pretty decent chunk of time. Anyways, sorry.
Counter frequencies that I just covered. The odds of a request for combat assistance at a given location didn't vary based upon what was happening in that area at that time, and no amount of concerted community effort to stamp out what was putting those NPCs in danger had any chance of succeeding. To illustrate what's changed, let's jump back to quantum. The miners are back in force, but there aren't yet any pirates, and thus there aren't any requests for combat assistance. Just as previously occurred, though, the pirates are going to slowly sniff out this opportunity and begin gravitating to this location. As their numbers increase, so will the odds of conflict with the miner, and thus the likelihood of a combat assist service beacon being issued.
I also kind of want to say that before Quantum Boost, this didn't make sense to me. It like looking at the range of this, I think they usually mark this as like 200 kilometers or something. No, it's got to be more than that. But it doesn't make sense for why the pirates would be all the way out here. You'd think they'd be closer to the low orbit where people could quantum jump out before they run into these pirates. But with Quantum Boost, it kind of would make sense if there's some reason that you have to, do that sort of mid-distance jump at the end there or something. But maybe that's just for graphical purposes with the simulation. I don't know.
You can see a few contracts now represented by the green icons. Quantum is dictating how many beacons should be present in this area in the exact details, such as how much alpha UEC is being offered, but the data is actually maintained by the service beacon service that interfaces to the game servers and exposes these contracts to players. So every contract that you're seeing
Maybe they're just
pop
getting
up,
interdicted.
which is a direct result of the amount of conflict happening within Quantum, can be seen and accepted by someone within the actual game. Security has started to show up, but isn't yet a major force, and the risk of piracy has gotten so great that some of the miners have decided to exit. The frequency of combat assist beacons is a function of both the quantity of miners and pirates and clamped by the minimum of either. So, as the miners depart, the number of outstanding beacons drops. Security has now reached the point where it's really starting to deter the pirates, and the reduced number of miners is just adding fuel to the fire. So, now the number of pirates starts to fall off pretty dramatically, which also impacts the total number of active beacons and instantiation frequency. Player actions are fed back into Quantum, such that if a lot of beacons are accepted and the NPC is successfully defended in the game, the security risk as perceived by the pirates in Quantum will increase, thus affecting their sense of whether the risk justifies the reward. This means that not only will the system ebb and flow of its own accord, but your actions within the game will directly impact the simulation and thus the overall state of the universe. There's one other important thing that I want to mention here, and that's the value of the additional context that Quantum is providing. We now know exactly who issued the request for combat assistance and even the likelihood that multiple ships might be involved. All of this information can be packaged up and associated with the beacon so that when and if a player accepts the contract, the instantiated mission can be customized to better reflect what Quantum says you should be seeing.
So again, the beacons are a thing. I think that there probably are something that'll be more interesting when we get more types of beacons. Right now, they're only combat beacons. I think beacons, or what would probably make more sense, would be for a full-on mission system to replace beacons. Mining requests, salvage requests, I guess also combat requests, medical rescue requests, all that kind of stuff I think would factor into this and change the way that pirates or security might spawn. So an interesting system, again, not one that we've seen too much of, but it is working in some capacity in the game. And hopefully we'll get an update on this soon, because all this stuff, man, is like clearly been talked about to death, and it'd be nice to have some more substantial part of it into the game. Here's the pricing stuff, though. I think this is what really interests folks.
The shop service has always had the ability to modulate the price of commodities based upon things like the amount of inventory on hand and its rate of change, but we haven't really exploited that feature for some of the basics like fuel and HPMC, which is the material required to effect repairs on a ship. One of the reasons for this is that it's one thing to have tradable commodities fluctuate in value according to some algorithmic logic that doesn't consider anything beyond the confines of that particular shop, but it's quite another when those materials are critical to playing the game. Now that we can properly gauge demand based upon factors external to the shop, though, even if the simulation logic still needs a lot of work, we're going to flip the switch and let the prices of fuel and repair materials start to undulate. So let's bring Quantum up again. The Tram and Myers mining outpost on Cellin has been selected so that we can see its real-time prices for plasma fuel, quantum fuel, and HPMC. Keep an eye on these prices as the Quanta arrive on scene. A few of the miners are from distant locales and will be looking to top off their quantum fuel tanks, and that increased consumption is causing prices to trickle up just a bit. Plasma fuel is jumping quite a bit more, though, because it's in constant demand due to the fact that the miners routinely have to traverse the surface of the moon looking for valuable deposits of ore to extract. The price of HPMC hasn't budged because there hasn't been any conflict in the area, but that's about to change. The pirates have started to arrive and attack the miners, and that means that there are going to be some damaged ships that require repairs, and the price will continue to rise as the amount of conflict grows. Pirates require fuel too, and most of their need revolves around the plasma they'll use to engage ships in close proximity, so it's starting to get fairly expensive. Security forces have now started arriving in force, which means even more conflict in the area, which is why the price of HPMC has finally started to take off. Security forces burn a lot of plasma fuel hunting for pirates, and this is proving to be more demand than the local stores of inventory can satisfy. This means temporary shortages and skyrocketing prices until either the demand abates or the economy rebalances to ensure a more regular supply of fuel to this area.
Okay, I want to go back real quick to this. Here's the problem here. So this is functioning in game as well. I don't know to what extent this is functioning, but the only things that they've added in Quantum so far are the repair, refuel, and restock pricing changing based on this kind of stuff, and the combat beacons based on the probability volumes we looked at. But if you look at this, obviously this is not happening in the game. This is going from 0.05 UEC all the way up to 0.15 UEC. That's a 300% increase. That is a lot. I don't think you ever run into a time when you notice that big a difference when you're refueling. Maybe some people do notice it. I probably don't pay enough attention. Our ships also kind of don't last long enough a lot of times to notice that kind of stuff. But obviously it takes a lot of simulation to make this happen, a lot of numbers to make this actually be affected. And part of the big problem with us in game is even if this is happening in the background, we don't have the subsumption NPCs, the ships being rendered in, all of the physical stuff that's supposed to let us know this is happening. So like getting into Selen, you should be hearing about, maybe you see on a journal update that miners are being attacked, or maybe you see a lot of broken NPC ships at a local repair shop that you go and stop by. Maybe you even are mining and you come across somebody getting attacked. All of those things would kind of clue you in on the fact that fuel and repair costs are going to be higher in that area. But since that doesn't really happen, it's hard for us to understand whether or not quantum is actually affecting the game. Even though they tell us it's in the game, we just don't see enough to know. And that's how quite a few of the things in game are right now. That's part of what's missing with the game, is more of those physical and noticeable signs of things changing. And again, something I hope that they talk about soon. I mean, I guess server meshing will make a big difference there, because then they can start to physicalize these NPCs, have these ships landing and taking off from stations, and all that kind of stuff. So maybe we should all just expect that quantum won't present itself to us in any real meaningful way until after server meshing has become more stable. We see it in the evening when you are barrel hauling. Prices change are so low, it's barely a win. Oh, the price changing is so low? I see. All right, so systemic triggers. This is the kind of stuff that's supposed to start dynamic events. And I think these are the types of things that we're seeing now in Space Station Korea, in the Ghost Hollow mission, in the data heist missions that they've been talking about. I think is this kind of stuff.
Up until now, all of our dynamic events have been manually triggered by someone loading up Quasar, selecting an event, specifying the input variables, and activating it. This works fine for major events that are intended to run for a long period of time, but it's problematic when the event needs to run multiple times per day, or only when specific conditions warrant, or needs to be customized based upon the current state of the universe. The solution to this problem is systemic triggers, which are small analytical programs that let us specify what sort of conditions within quantum warrant the creation of a dynamic event, and allow that event's inputs to be mapped to all sorts of simulation state. I'm going to bring quantum up one last time and highlight the location of the 3 drug labs within the Stanton system. Raven's Roost is on Microtech's moon Calliope.
Okay, so this isn't what I was talking about with those other missions. Those missions are triggered by something player controlled. These look like they are actually triggered by dynamic or systemic triggers, such as time or a certain threshold being passed.
Jumptown is on Crusader's moon Yella, and Paradise Cove is on ArcCorp's moon Lyria. For this test, I've removed all commodities except for drugs, and thus any green quanta you see moving around are focused on moving these illicit narcotics. A systemic trigger has been set up that monitors the total drugs purchased at any of the drug labs, which you can see in the graphs below the star map. If the total amount of drugs purchased at one of these locations over a period of time exceeds the specified threshold, it will trigger the Jumptown V2 dynamic event. The location and quantity of drugs sold would be passed to the event as inputs, which the mission logic might use for any manner of things, such as temporarily overriding the shopping data at that site for the duration of the event. The shop service that communicates with the game servers is linked to quantum, and thus all player transactions in the game are filtered back into the simulation, and their purchases are therefore just as relevant to the totals as those initiated by quanta. All of the drug labs are seeing a bit of action, and Paradise Cove looked like it might be the first to breach the threshold. Some red pirates have started moving into that area now, though, and the green freighters have started to flee. It looks like they've decided to focus on Raven's Roost, and you can tell by the constant level of elevated purchases that they're probably going to trip the trigger pretty soon. There, that's it. The conditions for the systemic trigger have been met. You can see that Jumptown V2 has now been added to Quasar's active dynamic events list at the top right, and below that you can see the input parameters that it was sent, which include the Raven's Roost location and a numeric value of 916 for the total purchased drugs variable, which the actual Jumptown V2 logic uses to configure how many free units of drugs the location will produce over the lifetime of the event. The ultimate purpose of systemic triggers, then, is to allow us to easily and programmatically dictate when and exactly how handcrafted custom content will be layered onto the background tapestry driven by quantum systemic logic.
A tapestry.
As our library of dynamic events grows and the sophistication of the simulation evolves, you'll eventually find that it's difficult to tell where one system ends and another begins, and the whole experience will just feel more engaging and unique than what either technology could deliver by itself.
Conclude for us.
That's it for our show today. I hope that you now have a better sense of some of the things we're aiming to accomplish over the next year, and that you're as excited as we are about the potential of these new features and
So clearly that didn't happen over the next year. That's how things kind of go. This system, people keep, the Tony Z joke is because it's just hard to get a good, solid idea of the actual timeline of this. I mean, this was the last update we've heard, and it was 2021. For some reason, they didn't give us a solid update last year. So we're still waiting for something substantial. And even after the changes that he had mentioned were coming, what's that? It's around here somewhere. The changes that he mentioned were coming in the update that they were going to do with the quantum stuff, probability volumes, all that stuff that we got last year. He said they would have subsequent updates every patch after that, and we haven't gotten that. So once again, the communication on this has been pretty spotty. I don't think it's gotten the job done on what the communication is supposed to do. It's only made us more confused. It has confused us on timelines. It has confused us on mostly timelines, I would say. They've been super clear about what it includes. So and I know timelines are hard. I understand that. But we were told that we would be getting an update every patch, and we haven't. And I think giving us a better idea of what's holding it back, whether that be quantum, or that just be, priorities being elsewhere. The economy is really important, and it would drive a lot more mission and activity in this game if people had a better idea of how it worked in the actual game and how they could make more money by exploiting it. It's a lot of fun, right? We like exploiting banks and trusts and money stuff. The Hurstons, I don't know. 5 months until Pyro, they better hurry. Yeah. What's up, non-Roboto? No, Roboto, how you doing? They need server meshing to really have this feature running fully. They need server meshing for a lot of stuff, don't they? Sven, you forgot your coffee? Dude, we need it for this kind of talk. This one's thick. This is a thick boy. The economy is, it causes distress. It causes excitement. It's a cool topic. The way they describe it is awesome. The ideas from the probability volumes to the VNPCs, to quantum itself, it's all very intensive. It sounds like a great simulation. I'm excited to be inside of it and playing it. But it's always a win question. So that wraps it up for the economy, folks. That's most of the information. I have a couple videos on my channel you can check out to get more of my opinion, but until we get another update on this, I'm probably not going to be covering it again. I'm hoping that sometime in the next few months we get to hear something about bounty hunting, but this will probably be my update on this whole system for the year. This is the super in-depth, super detailed version of it, and if you want something a little bit easier to follow, like I said, we've got a couple videos on it. But that's been it for today. Thank you so much for coming to check out the economy, folks. Make your money, and I'll catch you later. I won't actually catch you later, though. I promise. The stream is still going. Don't worry. We're good. We're here. I am going to end the stream, though. I know. So confusing. Almost like the roadmap of the economy, right? But yeah, I'm excited for this, man. This is it's cool stuff. I don't know how economies and MMOs work. Does anybody know of a game that works like this, that has a lot of detail built into like specific AI and tracking them down and seeing them kind of have a personality, or is that novel? The next ISC is previewing ship munching. Really? Oh, well, that's surprising. I assume that means then that that's going to be coming in whatever patches after 3.20, if they're talking about it this late. I'm glad they're at least talking about it. That should be good. RimWorld, really? RimWorld does stuff like this. Okay. The only MMO you know of is WoW, but you don't know about how it works. Okay. Pretty much every MMO out there is smart enough to just fake it and not go through all this hassle. Right. So that's the interesting bit. They go through a lot of hassle for stuff in this game to do it as an actual simulation. And there's quite a few arguments to be made about why that's a waste. I like it though. Novel because MMOs have a market board and players to dictate prices. Do most MMOs do just the player-driven economy? Figured it'd be easier to leave it up to the AI overall, or for the most part at least, because players are crazy. Players do really dumb things. We are humans in general. We break things, don't we? Can't trust us. Oh, is this lagging because I'm remuxing? Hurry up, please. You're making me look bad, OBS. Yes, most of them are player run. Works very well in EVE Online. I've heard good things about the EVE Online economy and about EVE Online's spreadsheets. Good things about their spreadsheets, yeah. WoW's economy was good fun. Had something like player-driven auction houses. Okay. Most of the ones you've played had something like player-driven auction houses. I see. Cool. So, player-driven economy is a big thing. I like that it's a little bit AI-driven because that means that they can basically say, something is going on in this system. The Magnus system has always had tons of activity, but in the last 3 months, several pirate orgs have made homes in that system. Because of that, NPC pirates have started to fill into the system because there's so much attacking to be done and not much security to fight back. And because of all of that, they can go behind the scenes and actually engineer a economic turndown in the system and make that a whole thing. Make the system for the rest of the year just be like this pit of despair where there's not much economy going on. It's kind of like a Wild West situation. And you can just change up areas like that based on how you're feeling the game is going rather than waiting for players to do it, which I think is really cool. We need to be able to bookmark safe spots. Yes, absolutely. Quantum beacons. We need those real soon. The real economy is run by humans. That's what you think, but this is all a simulation. As an occasional mover of freight, you worry about them using buy and sell info to raise events attractive, to make events attractive to pirates in locations of high commerce to promote pirate-friendly gameplay. Well, it depends on where it is, right? So Stanton, that's probably not going to happen as much. Pyro, yeah. Terra even, I would, Stanton maybe more than Terra. Nyx, sure. But like in a place like Terra maybe, or Sol, or just the safer parts of those systems, maybe not. I do think that there is a balance to be had though. Like if they're trying to entice pirates with events, not to push too hard. There's got to be more than just combat focused events, right? Guild Wars is a top rated MMO economy from what you can see on Google. And how do they do it? Oh, Guild Wars 2. Well, I look forward to seeing how they finally figure it out for Star Citizen. That being said, my good friends, I'm going to throw you all on to another streamer, somebody who's live. I am thinking Sigelian? Not seeing too many other folks live right now. But sometimes they don't even pop up on my screen. It's really weird. I have to like go into the actual list of folks to see all the names. Twitch's whole rating menu is not the best. But I think it's going to be Sigelian today. Sigelian's always a space, it's going to say a safe bet. Always a space bet. Doing fun things, probably some industrial gameplay, maybe some transport missions, something like that. I'm going to send you all on over to Seg. Hopefully he's having a good time. If not, please hop in there and make sure he is. Give him all the love, folks. Tell him hello. Tell him good love. Remember to get in on the Ares Inferno giveaway that's ending this weekend. And enjoy your day. I'm going to go watch some Barbie and see what all the fuss is about. No, I'm going to go watch it because Mrs. Tomato is a Barbie and she loves that. And we're going to have a good time. Anyways, y'all have a good day. I'll catch you later. Until tomorrow. Oh, tomorrow will be with Mrs. Tomato, so come check that out. Gameplay, criminal stuff. Mrs. Tomato is jumping in, probably with a Nerf gun. I'm sure we'll have some fun. Anyways, catch you later.